Every generation has a defining sitcom, and for my generation it was Drake and Josh. The show follows two stepbrothers, Drake the cool one and popular one, and Josh the Now we have to talk about a character that strikes fear into the hearts of many, someone worse than Stalin and Hitler. Megan is Drake and Josh's mean little sister that does mean things to them. Anyway, now that we got all the characters summarized, we can actually get on to the review. I just had to summarize all the characters for the people that have not seen the show. I'm talking about my favorite Drake and Josh episode, Treehouse. So our episode starts with Josh receiving a package from a bottle rocket. They go to build it with Drake, but then he accidentally messes it up, and it flies out the window, destroying their neighbor's treehouse. Drake and Josh run over to get the bottle rocket back, and we come to a tiny problem. The kid that got his treehouse shot down, he's a jerk and just keeps screaming at them. Here's how I would have fixed the scene. Instead of making the kid overly mean, they should made him overly nice and gave Drake and Josh the puppy dog eyes. That's why they're doing it out of guilt instead of being forced. I feel like that would have made the episode more rewarding instead of them being forced, and the fact that they're just doing it out of guilt. Kid complains so much you would think he's a Twitter user. The things that make this episode work is the misery. They caused the problem themselves by the bottle rocket. Now most shows seem to forget that misery is a part of comedy, and that's why comedy works. If no one is miserable, then you won't have a funny comedy. Someone has to do something, and then they have to pay for it. That's why Tom and Jerry is so funny, and many other comedies, but a lot of people seem to forget that misery is the key part of comedy. Someone has to be miserable. Drake and Josh are forced to rebuild the treehouse, and then they start work the following day.
Where's the door hole? Goes right there. See, I drew it with a magic marker.
What the hell is wrong with you?
I gotta use that clip more often. Drake drew on the door hole with a magic marker instead of making an actual door hole, so now they don't have a door hole, which means they can't get out. What makes this episode work so well is their facial expression. They're just so good, and I feel like they're really underappreciated. Also their chemistry. I feel like if these were two other actors, it wouldn't have worked nearly as well. Only these two actors can play these characters. They just bounce off each other so well. Yeah, the facial expressions are really good in this episode, and I just love the fact that Josh doesn't even sound mad at Drake when he finds out the stupid thing he did. He just sounds sad and disappointed, like a disappointed parent. Drake and Josh try convincing Megan to give them the power saw, but she refuses because she's Megan. You idiot, you can't persuade her to give you the power saw that way. You have to roll a 6. Haven't you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? Oh yes, I believe the technical term for that is a rodent of unusual size. That squirrel's gone nuts! So Drake and Josh start thinking of ways to try to get out of the treehouse. Don't worry guys, I'm the expert with doors. As we all know, I am the expert at doors, and I definitely don't suck at opening them. Nope, not at all. Drake and Josh use quick attack. It was not very effective. Eventually, after enough rams, the house eventually comes down. Well, they're dead. Anyway, the episode ends there. Besides a few post-credit scenes that add nothing to the plot. Start with two small negative things I have. Is the fact that we never get to see the treehouse fully built and how they got out of the situation after they fell and the boards were on top of them. But that's just a small nitpick. It doesn't really affect the quality of the episode. It's just a nitpick. One thing I like about the episode is that you don't need to know who these characters are to enjoy the episode, because you learn all you need to know from them. Like I said, the facial expressions are great. While this episode is funny, it's the facial expressions and line delivery that make this episode a whole lot better. I firmly believe that if these two characters were played by different actors, this episode wouldn't have been nearly as good, and it has a nice mix of verbal and slapstick comedy. So if you're a physical comedy guy, you get a lot of physical comedy jokes, and if you're a verbal comedy guy, you get a lot of verbal comedy jokes. Like I said on the delivery, the voice cracking was a nice touch. Yeah, in a few scenes, Josh's voice cracks, and it's really freaking funny. Overall, I would recommend it if you're a fan of sitcoms and enjoy the tropes, but if you're not a fan of sitcoms, then this is definitely not for you. But if you see it on the TV, it's worth a watch. I mean, if you have kids or siblings, it's not gonna make you run out of the room in horror at how bad the show is. The delivery will at least entertain you, even if the jokes don't necessarily make you laugh.